make a lot of doctor appointments in between. Come when it works. Yeah, so, you know.
I think that's red. That is Gabby.
That's Gabby?
That's our program assistant, Gabby.
What does she do to her hair? I've never seen her that long. Maybe she just never was in
Please listen for when we sing This Little Light of Mine during the service, and children will be welcome to meet our child care volunteers in the lobby. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we are a non-creedal community. We do not subscribe to a specific set of beliefs. We live by a covenant that encourages ethical behavior, affirms democracy, celebrates the worth of each individual, and unites us in a search for truth in meaning. We welcome you. For more information about our congregation, please go to orlandouu.org or email welcometeam@orlandouu.org. One special announcement today. Today will be a meeting for the Wrestling with Our Understanding of Racism group. It will be meeting both via Zoom and in person. Please note that the meeting will be in Gore Hall Room A, which is a change of location from previous sessions. This month's meeting will be learning about Beloved Conversations Virtual. And if you'd like to join us on Zoom, please look in the weekly update for details on how to join in. All of our other announcements are on slides before and after the service, and all have links in the weekly update or on our website. Thanks again for being here in person or online today. Let's get started.
I see my one person. Where's the other person? She's wiggling.
Wiggling too much. I'm gonna light.
Please say the words with me as we light the chalice. In the light of truth and in the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing our opening hymn, number 389, Gathered Here. The words will be projected on the screen.
389 is a round, so we will sing it all together one time through, and then we'll do 3 more times. High voices starting and low voices coming in. You may self-identify your high voice or your low voice. The second hymn is also the same when we get to the centering hymn. The last line, Spirit Draw Near, we'll repeat that several times until you see me stop. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near.
So if I remember correctly, Aubrey, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that that hymn was written by a United Church of Christ pastor who wrote it for a gathering of gay men who were meeting during the AIDS crisis in the 80s. And I think it adds another level of depth to think about people in that time at such great risk, doing so much grieving, so much fear, thinking about the power of one strong body, all of them together. I also wanted to say that because this is a song that we sing with my daughter before bedtime, and it's really meaningful for our family. Good morning. My name is Reverend Kierstin Homblette Allen. I serve as the affiliated minister of this congregation. What that means is that I serve my ministry somewhere else. That somewhere else is at Meadville Lombard Theological School, and I am honored to serve as the program director of the Beloved Conversations program. So I'm here with this congregation occasionally to lead worship and be part of the community, but most of the time I'm serving there. In Beloved Conversations, which is the focus of our worship service this morning, we are here to heal the impact of racism on our lives and our world in order to get free together. Our worship service this morning is focused on the ways that we can engage racial justice work as a Unitarian Universalist spiritual practice. It's wonderful to be following on the heels of last week's fantastic worship service, when we heard incredible stories about the history and current justice ministries of this congregation as they relate to racial justice. Today you'll have a chance to hear from a few members of our congregation who have participated in the Beloved Conversations program and hear them reflect on those experiences. I hope you'll leave this morning inspired to be part of the ongoing story of this congregation's quest for racial justice. All of the elements of the service this morning, the music, the story, the reflections, are connected to or used in the Beloved Conversations virtual program. So you can get a little bit of what that experience is like. Our call to worship this morning is by Layla Ibrahim, a Unitarian Universalist lay leader, and it's from Bless the Imperfect, Meditations for Congregational Leaders. She writes, "We are not in church to be with people who want to sing the same music, or rally for the same cause, or attend the same retreats. We are in church to learn to love better. We disagree, we annoy, we flake out on one another, and we worship. We support, we hold, and we affirm one another. This is really only one choice between imperfect community and no community. Again and again, we're called to choose to commit ourselves to building a more just, more diverse, and yet ever messy and imperfect beloved community." In that vein, our story for all ages this morning is an animated reading of a children's book called Thank You, Omu by Oge Mora. My 4-year-old loved having this book home from the library and the way that the author shows the building of community through sharing food and love. This is the way that I envision the small steps towards our collective liberation. Each of us offering a bit of what we need and what we love to each other, sharing when we have more than we need, accepting what others can give, breaking down barriers to access, and living lives of joy. The animation and reading of this story was done by the incomparable Glenn Thomas Rideout, who is a UU music director and the creative lead for our monthly Beloved Conversations worship services. Enjoy this story.
On the corner of First Street and Long Street, on the very top floor, Omu was cooking a thick red stew in a big fat pot for a nice evening meal. She seasoned and stirred it and took a small taste. "What a delicious stew," Omu said. "Tonight's dinner will surely be the best I have ever had." With that, Omu put down her spoon and went to read a book before supper. As the thick red stew simmered on the stove, its scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall toward the street and around the block until knock. Someone was at the door. When Omu opened it, she saw a little boy. "Little boy," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was playing my race car down the hall when I smelled the most delicious smell," the little boy replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." Stew," he sighed. "That sure sounds yummy." Well, with that, Omu closed the door and went back to her book. As she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall toward the street and around the block until knock, knock. Someone was at the door. When Omu opened the door, this time she saw a police officer. "Miss Police Officer," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was on duty down the street when I smelled the most delicious smell," Miss Police Officer replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ah, stew," she said. Her mouth watered. "That sounds mighty tasty." Omu thought for a moment. There was still enough to share. "Would you like some?" The police officer nodded. Once again, Omu spooned out some thick red stew from her big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Omu," the officer said, and went on her way. And so for the second time, Omu closed the door and went back to her book. Sure enough, as she read, her thick red stew's scrumptious scent wafted out the window and out the door, down the hall, toward the street, and around the block until knock, knock, knock. Again, someone was at Omu's door. This time, when she opened it, she saw a hot dog vendor. "Mr. Hot Dog Vendor," Omu exclaimed, "what brings you to my home?" "I was selling hot dogs down the block when I smelled the most delicious smell," Mr. Hot Dog Vendor replied. "What is it?" "Thick red stew." "Ooh, stew." The vendor licked his lips. "That sounds quite delectable." So Omu spooned out some thick red stew from the big fat pot for her nice evening meal. "Thank you, Omu," the hot dog vendor said, and went on his way. Throughout the day, people from all across the neighborhood knocked on Omu's door. She fed a shop owner, a cab driver, a doctor, an actor, a lawyer, a dancer, a baker, an artist, a singer, an athlete, a bus driver, a construction worker. Even the mayor stopped by. And each time they knocked, Omu shared. Soon the sky darkened, the street lights brightened, and it was finally time for dinner. But when Omu opened her big fat pot of thick red stew for her nice evening meal, it was empty. Omu sniffed. "There goes the best dinner I ever had." Sorry and blue, she sat at the table with her empty pot until knock, 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 knock. Who could it be, Omu wondered. When she opened her door, she saw the little boy, the police officer, the hot dog vendor, the shop owner, the cab driver, the doctor, the actor, the lawyer, the dancer, the baker. Why, everyone she fed today was at her door. I'm sorry, everyone. Omu sighed. My thick red stew is all gone. I have nothing left to share. The little boy tugged at Omu's sleeve. Don't worry, Omu. We are not here to ask. We are here to give. The police officer carried in a fresh salad. The mayor entered with a roast chicken. The baker brought a collection of sweet goodies. Even the little boy presented Omu with something special in a shiny red envelope. Everyone who had knocked on Omu's door that day squeezed inside her tiny apartment, and together they ate, danced, and celebrated. While Omu's big fat pot of thick red stew was empty, her heart was full of happiness and love. That dinner was the best dinner she had ever had. The end.
It is our practice in this community to pause every week to get in touch with the truths of our lives, our joys and sorrows, hopes and fears. What is true for you this week? What is lifting you up or causing you to struggle? Take a few breaths and connect to what is going on for you. We do this together in community because it's good and important for us to reflect on our lives and to have a chance to say some of these truths out loud. And because when one person's truth is spoken, often another person recognizes a bit of theirs and knows they are not alone. Together, we hold all that is shared. If you want to contribute to our collective sharing of joys and concerns, to be read just like this each Sunday during worship, you can send an email to joysandconcerns@orlandouu.org during the week so that it might be shared. Additionally, if you're attending the service in person, you can fill out a card at the registration table outside before the service and hand it to an usher. If you are joining us online, you're welcome to type your joy or concern into the chat so that others may witness it. Bring your joys and all your sorrows when we come together. Come as you are. Your whole self is welcome in this sacred space that we create together. This morning, we are especially holding the family of Marty Haney, particularly prayers for Amelia, Shannon, Bob, and Jessica. I'm happy to share that Dale Steakley is home and welcoming visitors, cards, and calls. Wonderful news. Rose Byler shares a sorrow. Her brother Joe Byler died unexpectedly this week. She appreciates prayers and comforting thoughts on behalf of his wife and children and the entire Byler family. Rose is currently out of town and out of the country. Our hearts and prayers are also with all of those living through and dying in wars, conflicts, gun violence, from hunger and other traumas here in our community and around the world. With those whose bodies and autonomy are under attack, and all those fighting to protect it. With those who are grieving, lonely, and struggling with life's daily challenges. And with those who are celebrating joys, large and small. Also, in particular, this week, all the children and families who are headed back to school this week or this season in their excitement and nervousness. May we hold these truths, those spoken out loud and those held in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, with care and compassion as a community. Our meditation this morning comes from Adrienne Marie Brown, who grows healing ideas in public through her multi-genre writing, her music, and her podcasts. You may be familiar with her texts Emergent Strategy or Pleasure Activism. In a piece for her blog entitled Grief is Gratitude, Fear is Intelligence, Truth is Strategic, she begins by saying, "Over this past week, I've been cycling between feeling the rough emotions of this moment and feeling for my and our resilience, our capacity to recover from harm. And I've been connecting with loved ones to do both of these things, to vent and to move through the worst possible case scenarios, to breathe into the what now and where do we go from here." I don't know about you, but I relate to those feelings. So much of what's happening in our lives or in the news of our world this week, this month, this year, this many years brings up big emotions, as well as questions and fears about where we are collectively headed in the future. Adrienne Marie Brown offers a practice for if you are overwhelmed with fear and terror. I've used it for myself and thought we could try it together this morning. We'll do it as an adapted personal silent meditation here today, but I encourage you to try it again with a partner and voice these feelings out loud to each other. She says, "It's a great time to stop being polite. Be loving, kind, direct, but most of all, be truthful, full of the capacity to speak the truth when you see it and feel it. I remain fascinated by us, anticipating how we will move beyond reactionary rhetoric and action to build our connections and move forward from our deepest love and longing. If you are overwhelmed with fear and terror, do this together. First, name your fears and or your griefs. Let feelings come with them. With your hands, show where the fears live in your body. Second, place both hands on your belly and name things that make you feel resilient. Imagine those things filling you up. Rock and roll your body a bit. Make more room for resilience inside yourself. Third, offer gratitude for having the complexity to hold grief, fear, and resilience in your same miraculous body. one day at a time. One brave, loving, radical day at a time. I invite you to remain seated and in a meditative state as we sing our centering hymn, number 1023, Building Bridges. Words will be on the screen.
We invite you now into the practice of generosity. This being the first Sunday of the month, we have a new Share the Plate partner that we hope you'll support. This month, we're supporting the Health Care Center for the Homeless. You can support them by finding a link to their organization in our weekly newsletter. And this week, we'd like to welcome Terry Betts, who is the Director of Development for the Healthcare Center for the Homeless, to tell us a little bit more about the agency's vision and their cause. Terry?
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Terry, and I'm the Director of Development at Healthcare Center for the Homeless here in Orlando, and we're known to our patients as Orange Blossom Family Health and Orange Blossom Pediatrics. This is my first in-person presentation in over 2 years, so bear with me if I'm a little nervous, but thank you for allowing me to join you today. The Health Center provides medical, dental, behavioral health, and pharmacy services for homeless and low-income housed, but uninsured and underinsured residents of Orange, Osceola, and Seminole counties. We also offer street outreach for individuals who are experiencing homelessness and are unsheltered. And as an extension of this program, we also offer a permanent supportive housing program for homeless individuals who are experiencing chronic homelessness. We currently operate 4 Orange Blossom Family Health locations in the Tri-County area. Our main site is at the intersection of Robinson and Street and Orange Blossom Trail, so straight up the street here. That's our main site. We have another large site in the Ivy Lane community, one on the campus of Evans High School, and a site in Kissimmee. Orange Blossom Pediatrics is on the campus of the OCPS Academic Center for Excellence, so just a few blocks from our main site. And then we have 2 mobile dental units and a mobile medical unit, which round out our current care delivery options. And our outreach and housing teams, because we are short of space, are actually located, co-located with one of our community partners near the downtown Orlando area. And this partner also offers various services for those that we serve as well. And then we also operate a residential TB shelter for homeless individuals who have infectious tuberculosis. Now, all of our physical clinic sites offer primary and preventive medical care, with 4 of them also offering integrated oral health services. Now, Kissimmee is our current exception. They only have the primary medical care at this point, but we do hope to be able to implement those services there within the next year or so. And we have been around for a number of years, actually since 1993, starting out as an evening clinic at a local shelter, so we've grown quite a bit to where we are now. In 2021, all of our Orange Blossom sites cared for over 15,000 unduplicated patients. This generated over 41,000 encounters or appointments. Now, looking at our most recent years of care, over 90% of our patients were living in poverty. That's at or below 100% of the federal poverty level. Over 70% had no form of health care coverage. We can accept some coverage, Medicaid, Medicare, and so forth, but over 70% had no coverage at all, and this includes some children. And approximately 20% were experiencing homelessness. Now, the Health Center has tried to be a one-stop shop for our patients and offer multiple integrated services. So in addition to the core services I've spoken to, we have programs such as a diabetes clinic, which is providing focused care for patients with uncontrolled diabetes, one of our most common diagnoses. We have a remote monitoring program for patients with uncontrolled hypertension, another one of our most common diagnoses. And a high-impact HIV prevention program that we launched last year with support from the CDC. We have a denture sponsorship program for our homeless and senior patients, improving quality of life. And of course, at this time of year, we're in the midst of multiple back-to-school events for children and youth. Now, one of the challenges for uninsured patients is managing chronic disease. The COVID-19 pandemic has been a difficult time for patients with chronic conditions. We're not out of it yet. It brought back to the forefront the disparities in healthcare access and health literacy community members experience based on race, ethnicity, culture, and economic factors. And our patients have felt this impact keenly. We are looking forward to what is coming for the Health Center. Later this month, we are initiating regular services on the campus of Eccleston Elementary through our mobile medical and dental units. We hope at some point they'll be physically on the site, but currently it'll be through the mobile units. Next year, we will be expanding our mobile health services with the addition of 2 more mobile units, 1 medical and 1 dental. Both of these expansion opportunities were made possible through the federal government because we are a federally qualified health center. And their goal is to expand access to health services for underserved community members. So we are grateful for this ability to care for more patients in our community. And then we're looking soon to expand our Ivy Lane Center as well, hopefully in the next year or 2. And I know this is short and sweet, but I am always happy to provide more information as needed. If you would like to reach out to me directly with any questions, Gabby has my contact info. Because I'm not a patient-facing employee, staff member at the Health Center, my job is fundraising, so I'm working mostly remotely now. But you can always reach me by email or by phone. I'm happy to speak at any time about all that we do. But I do want to say thank you so much for your time and attention this morning, and thank you for all you do for those we serve. I've been with the organization for over 14 years, and the church and the Alliance have always been a part of what we do. So we are so grateful for your ongoing concern about those we serve and for helping us to do what we do. And it is a pleasure seeing all of you in person. It has been a while. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry. All right, as our baskets go around, obviously, share the plate will be our focus. If you would prefer to donate online, please let us know that you donated by dropping a line to Gabby, our program assistant. Your financial support allows the many ministries of the First Unitarian Church of Orlando to thrive. To make an offering online to support our ministries, simply go to orlandouu.org, click the donate button in the upper right corner, send a text, or mail a check.
My name is Jakaren Olaoya. I use she, her pronouns, and I am currently located in Macon, Georgia. I'm here to talk to you about my experiences with Beloved Conversations and working in spaces of anti-racism and anti-oppression education. Beloved Conversations has both changed and deepened my faith experience through Unitarian Universalism. I have always had to think about what it means to show up in spaces as a woman, as a Black woman, as a Black queer woman. And so in this work that Beloved Conversations is doing, I've realized how much of that work has been focused on white supremacy culture, both undoing it, but also in focusing on it heavily. It's important, and also I've realized that there's so much more work for me to do in it. When I first started as the communications coordinator for Beloved Conversations, I was so sure that I would not want to work in anti-racism and anti-oppression work long term. One of the things that I saw often is that people would get pigeonholed into these very specific topics, and that became their work. And so they can't ever really do anything else. They can't talk about anything else. And I'm someone with a huge, wide variety of interest and experience, and so I wanted to be able to have that freedom. But what I realized is that I can't have that freedom if no one understands why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. If no one understands that I believe that I matter, if no one understands that I know the value in doing this work, not only for myself, but for other people. This is communal work. We all have to do it. And so in thinking about all of those things, I realized that by talking about and doing this work of anti-racism and anti-oppression, I was actually expanding my own capacity to share and to learn. It became very important to me that people are able to show up as their full selves in any spaces that they come into, especially spaces of Unitarian Universalism. And so that work and that learning over the past year and a half has been really significant for me. And I see changes in the way that I see the world and how I center my experience and the experience of other BIPOC people, and centering the experiences of anyone who has suffered under oppression.
Cynthia, I'm so glad you were able to join me to have a conversation about our experience as podmates in Beloved Conversations. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Cynthia. I'm a member of a Unitarian church in St. Petersburg. I've been here since 2011, and before that I was at a Unitarian church in Lakeland, Florida. So I've been a Unitarian for 15 years, I guess, 17 years, something like that. And Beloved Conversations came along at a good time in my own spiritual journey. So I've been grateful for the pod to sort of help process all of this learning.
Yeah. Did you ever do the in-person Beloved Conversations?
No, I did not. I did not know about any of those in-person events. I did do Jubilee 3 when it went online, and I do attend 8th Principle Learning Community meetings monthly. So I have my finger in a few pies related to racial justice and anti-oppression work, and I find that they're nicely complementing each other as I move into this space more intentionally.
And has your congregation approved the 8th principle?
Alas, no. Our congregation has not really heard much about the 8th principle, aside from a handful of us who went to the virtual GA in 2020. There were about, I think, 8 of us. And those 8 then also went through the first Beloved Conversations that was virtual last fall. And 2 of those folks then went through the spring iteration again. I could not, my schedule was just too full, but we're gaining momentum in our congregation, but rather slowly.
Well, and we're in the same place. We have not joined the 220 other congregations who have passed the 8th principle. We're making great progress on that. And I think it's a nice tie between Beloved Conversations Virtual and the 8th principle. And I think that there is a lot of overlap for those of us who are involved. So I also want to address folks who are watching us, and we keep talking about this pod. And so Beloved Conversations Virtual was a wonderful experience, and we both did it in the fall. And we I think we had maybe 6 modules where we had different amounts of learning that was given to us. Pick and choose what you want. Also, our pod, our group, our learning community, if you will, met every other week for about an hour and a half during the time that we were going through Beloved Conversations Virtual. Our pod has continued to meet, and we meet every month. We'll have podcasts we listen to or readings, and we hold the same covenant that we created when we were together as a pod. And so the pod is really companions in the journey, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Helpful to have someone to talk about your reactions to, and how does this fit with my life, and how do I make sense of this, and how does this fit with our church life? And I think we've all are members of very different congregations, and so that's been really interesting. We have someone in our pod whose congregation is as small as about 40 official members, and we also have someone for a very large church in Boston. So, you know, all sizes of congregations, which has been really a great learning, I think, for all of us. We made deals with each other, if you will. We became accountable for being there every other week, for doing the work, and for reflecting and being willing to learn and grow and stretch ourselves as part of this pod that we were in. I think we really stressed our relationships with one another over than if we really got all of the readings discussed, because we never have.
No, we did not get them all discussed.
And in fact, recently we've gone from having 2 podcasts that we're going to listen to for the next meeting, and we can't do 2, we can only do 1. So by the time we get our check-ins done and talk about some things, we're down to talking about 1 podcast at this point. But that's okay, because I think people learn in relationship, and so relationships are probably more important than making sure we did all of that. We were flexible in what people needed at times, and I think it was really important for me, and I'm so glad, Cynthia, you were able to join with me today and talk with First Unitarian Church of Orlando about our experiences with Beloved Conversations Virtual.
Thank you. Yeah, me too. I think the more we can get the word out there, the better.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think we agreed we would try to hold a conversation about, or at least talk about our own experiences, is what does racial justice have to do with our own spirituality?
Yes, and you know, I've been thinking a lot about this, particularly we're in a situation with an interim minister, and we're trying to gather from our congregation what that congregation needs moving into the future, because we hope to call a settled minister at some point again. So I think the question has come up sometimes that some folks want really focused personal spiritual growth out of the Sunday services. And some of us are saying, well, but we like social justice and we want to make sure that that's part of it. And I think in the past, it's been presented as sort of an either or. Either your church is focused on spirituality and personal development, or your church is focused on social justice. And for me, it's really a both and. I consider what we do in Beloved Community to be part of my spiritual practice, absolutely. So I think if we can move folks in that direction, we'll have a lot more success.
Mm-hmm. I think those are some great points. For me, my anti-racist work that I've done for years, and my other anti-oppression work, you know, women's rights work that I do, and LGBTQ plus work that I do, that's all part of who I am. And for me, that nurtures me and my spirituality, and I can't even imagine them not being connected. It's not just from you know, reading and all of that. It's much more of a whole experience, and I think that's the position of Beloved Conversations virtual too. It's that really looking at this within our own lives and our own spirituality.
Yeah, and I think, the piece that I really embraced from the 8th principle folks is the notion of accountability. I mean, if we say we're going to do this work, how are we going to hold ourselves accountable for doing this work? And so I find that the Beloved Conversations allows us to think through some of that. And that for me has been very helpful to think about accountability. What does it look like at the individual level? For me personally, what does it look like at the congregational level? And what does it look like in the larger UU community or in the communities in which we live? How does that live itself out? And so that piece of accountability has been really important for me, I think.
I'm so grateful to Kierstin and Ellen and Cynthia for those reflections. And I want to give a shout out to those of us from this congregation who have engaged with the Beloved Conversations program in the past. So from 2010 until early 2020, we ran an in-person program in congregations. And I believe that this congregation had the opportunity to participate in that 4 different times. So there are a number of people from this congregation who went through that traditional in-person program. And if that's you in this room, I'd love to have you wave your hand or some way indicate, like, I was there. Yes, awesome. Thank you. And then I'm curious if there are folks in the room who've had a chance to do our virtual program, which began in the fall of 2020 and has replaced that traditional in-person program. Yeah, a couple of folks. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So if you have questions about any of the stuff we're talking about today, these are your experts here in the room. I've had the honor to serve the Beloved Conversations program in different capacities for about 6 years. And my favorite part of doing this work is hearing stories from people about the ways that this program has changed them, how it's deepened their understanding of themselves and our world, how it expands their spiritual skills for our shared mission of justice making in the world, how it brings joy and playfulness and beauty and new relationships into their lives. There are lots of amazing anti-racism programs. I'm so grateful for that in our world. And there are lots of amazing spiritual formation programs. But I'm especially grateful to help create and run a program that combines those 2 things, because we know that they are inextricably connected. Learning about and practicing racial justice, and learning about and practicing racial identity development, and aligning our internal values with the way that we live in the world are spiritual experiences, and they're essential to a faithful practice of our shared faith, Unitarian Universalism. So I was going to say a bunch more about this, and I could talk forever, but I'm also going to say it at Wrestling with Racism this afternoon. So I want to make sure we have enough time for the other people who want to talk to you this morning. So I'll just finish briefly by saying that as a designer and a participant in the Beloved Conversations community, I know that my spirit has been lifted by being a part of something that is so radically inclusive and affirming. Witnessing more than 3,000 Unitarian Universalists engage this program in the last 2 years of its existence has given me hope for our faith community and for a world that could feel more like Omu's kitchen. Authentic, connected, loving, bountiful, joy-filled. Change is coming, my friends, and I hope you'll consider being part of it, whether through this program or through the many other opportunities offered by this congregation and our wider community. Together, let's imagine what's possible and work to make it happen.
From brokenness there's whole, I know. From brokenness there's whole.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine?
To be
change is coming.
I know.
What do we need to imagine?
Yes, I know. I know. From brokenness there's whole. I know. Yes, from brokenness there's whole. And I know.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine?
I know.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming.
What do we need to imagine?
Change is coming.
What do we need to imagine? 'Cause I know. From brokenness there's whole. I know. From brokenness there's whole.
Change is coming. What do we need to imagine? Change is coming. What do we need to imagine?
'Cause I know.
Change is coming.
I know.
What do we need to
Brokenness there's whole. I know.
Change is coming.
I know.
What do we need to
Brokenness there's
imagine? So, if these personal reflections have piqued your interest in this Beloved Conversations program, I have some very good news for you. Registration is currently open for the fall term of the Within program. Within is the first phase of Beloved Conversations, focused on the internal spiritual work and the individual learning and unlearning that each of us needs to do as we engage in explorations of race and our individual and collective work for racial justice. It happens entirely online, and much of it is done at your own pace. Traditional courses and programs about race and racism often focus on the learning needs of white people, leaving people of color in the role of teacher, example, or representative, which they have not always agreed to be. However, as you can imagine, the learning around issues of racial identity and racial justice is very different for white folks and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC, and Within is offered in two separate programs to meet those needs. First, there is a Within program called Gathering Ourselves for BIPOC participants, and there's a Within program called Unlearning for Liberation for white participants. Both Within programs involve opportunities for individual, self-paced learning, relationship building in small groups, and large group worship and fellowship. The fall and spring terms contain different content, and so participants can sign up for one or both, and they may begin the program in either the spring or the fall. Within is open to any adult who wants to join, regardless of connection with or participation in a Unitarian Universalist congregation. As I learned more about the importance of working for racial justice, I realized that I had at best an incomplete understanding of what's involved, which could reduce both my commitment to my internal work and/or my ability to be as effective as possible. Beloved Conversations Virtual was a natural next step to the in-person program I took at 1U before the pandemic. The online format worked well. I really enjoyed working with UUs from other congregations. And the large variety of resources, including readings, interviews, and video presentations, were both rich and thoughtfully assembled. I especially appreciated the way topics and subtopics were organized. For example, I found the discussion of our need to maintain control and yet take appropriate and necessary risks explained from several different perspectives to be most helpful. My advice to anyone taking the course is to engage the learning resources several times and provide time for reflection over the 2-week periods between your group meetings. There is so much to learn. Registration for the fall term opened on June 22nd and closes on August 26, 2022. The fall term will begin on September 12th. The Beloved Conversations Within program is also a prerequisite for the second phase of the program called Among, which is for congregations whose members have participated in Within. In Among, we take our learnings from within and focus them on institutional change in our congregations. Among congregations work with a dedicated coach and a core group of up to 20 Within alums from their congregation to better understand the ways dominant white culture is woven into the congregation's systems, explore possibilities for change in up to 2 chosen areas of congregational life, learn from the example of others who have made bold changes, center the spiritual needs and voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and create a plan for change that fits the congregation and context. The application process for new Among congregations will open for the 2023-2024 church year, and it would be great for 1U to work towards congregational participation in that program. We have already had a number of people participate from within from our congregation and are working hard to get more folks signed up for this year. I definitely encourage you to sign up for Within so you can be part of the Among core group when we undertake this next important step of Beloved Conversations. Lots of information about all the Beloved Conversations offering is available on flyers today at the 1U Justice table during coffee hour and also on the Meadville Lombard website at www.meadville.edu/beloved. You can talk to Reverend Kierstin or any of us who have participated in this service if you have questions. Thank you. Once again, please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing our closing hymn, Wo Ya Ya, number 1020. Words will be on the screen.
Our closing words come from the Reverend Elizabeth Wynne. called Our Journey is to Transform. As Unitarian Universalists, our journey is to transform the big and the small, to transform ourselves and to transform the world. Universalism means no one is outside the circle of love, and no one is disposable. We stubbornly seek out the spark of the divine in each other, no matter what. Interdependence means none of us is truly free until we are all free, and our thriving is bound up in the earth's thriving. We struggle for liberation from the violence of white supremacy, sexism, ableism, classism, and heterosexism. Our covenants mean we make promises to our communities to honor love and justice above all else. Love and justice above all else. Amen.
Please join me in reading the words to extinguish the chalice. We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are